Alright guys, welcome to my channel. This is going to be a video following on from my last video, which was titled My Kundalini Awakening. And so if you haven't seen that one, then check that out first. This video, I'm going to try and focus it in on the few years following that, which is really my dark night of the soul period, I guess. And the absolute worst of it lasted about 3 years, where I was essentially bedbound for most of that. I'd get up in the morning, sort of potter around for a few hours, then back to bed in the afternoons, get up for a little bit, eat, back to bed, repeat. And because the symptoms were so intense and powerful, and I was so fatigued all the time, that I just couldn't do anything. And by the end of that period, I could barely walk anymore, and I basically had to rebuild from there for the sort of 4 years following that. So anyway, yeah, I'll go through what was going on for this sort of first 3 years following the reawakening. So yeah, the symptoms over the it took about a month from the reawakening that I mentioned in the last video. So we're talking, it was around about basically through December 2010, my physical health completely collapsed, and the symptoms just got more and more powerful, more and more intense over that period. So I'll go through some of the physical, first of all, symptoms that I was going through. So I think I mentioned this in the last video, but it felt like the entirety of my body was like an ocean, and all these currents were just flowing through it. My inner part of my body no longer felt physical, and I was getting intense pins and needles everywhere. They were like pins and needles, but they were different. They were more charged, more electrical than pins and needles, and shifting and moving under my skin. It felt like my muscles were being ripped apart from the inside like glue, and the tension and tightness was being twisted and kind of wrung out of them. I was constantly going through they're known as kriyas. Kriyas is like the Sanskrit word for these spontaneous movements that occur during a Kundalini awakening, and my body had been flung into all sorts of crazy positions. Because like at first, when I had the first awakening initially, I'd get these sort of strong desire to move with the energy, and but by this point it was almost becoming impossible not to move with it. I felt like I had to put huge amounts of restraint in to sort of hold my arms down to my body to stop them being flung off in crazy positions. But all the movements felt really precise. Like I'd be twisted into certain positions, and I could feel this tension being released in certain areas, and that release would allow the energy to move on to somewhere else and release tension somewhere else. It was on one level to like my logical sort of mind, which was desperately trying to make sense of all this, and that was a task that it was completely inadequate of undertaking, to be honest. But on that level, from that kind of rational, almost logical level, it felt there's just this chaotic situation, completely out of control. But it wasn't. It was really precise and really ordered on another level. So yeah, there was that stuff going on. I had all sorts of pressure around my head for weeks and weeks, perhaps even months. It felt like there was this cap around my head that was just getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, like someone was screwing bolts in to tighten it around my head. Just all this pressure all over my forehead, pressure in the back of my eyes. It felt like someone was hitting my forehead with like a toffee hammer just for weeks and weeks on end. I had these spiral drilling sensations, like whirlpools just drilling into various areas, and a lot of this stuff was getting really painful because the energy was getting so powerful and kind of burning through my flesh that it, it was just beginning to get extremely painful. There were periods when it felt like I was getting the base of my spine like slashed with razor blades as it tried to get through all these blockages, because this energy moving inside was just hitting all these blocks in my physical body, and it was just causing a lot of pain and discomfort. There were like lumps coming up. I remember like one coming up on the back of my head, really big lump coming up, kind of rashes and sort of itching feelings. I think that was just like some kind of toxins and stuff being cleared from the body. What else was? Yeah, all these kind of spasmy sort of muscle twitches and things, and my feet like going into crazy little positions and like cracking and twisting of my joints. And as it went on through the sort of weeks and early months, I just became so fatigued and tired that I could barely do anything. And that's when I ended, it started to get to the point where like I said, just becoming more and more debilitated and eventually, bedbound for a long period of time. And there's no respite from the symptoms. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, continuous. And along with all the physical, there's a lot of psychic kind of phenomena. I don't mean like psychic as in, reading someone's mind, although that kind of stuff has come to various degrees along the path. But I mean, like phenomena of the mind or whatever, like visionary experiences and things like that. Because one thing that's going on is when this tension and blockages have been released from the physical, it's releasing, like, basically I think all physical illness is tied to emotional problems. They're completely linked, and it's like the emotions and any pain you've suffered in your life and not dealt with properly at the time gets like locked into the physical body and stored in the tissue. And when you have a Kundalini awakening, basically everything is coming up for clearing. You've like opened Pandora's box. The tiniest little thing that might seem completely insignificant to the most repressed thing that you've kind of pushed down and tried to ignore, it's all coming up and all to be processed. And at first there's so much coming up, the body just can't deal with it. And I think that's partly why it gets so much fatigue. You're like going through such a degree, like when you're a teenager, for example, you're undergoing a massive change from a child to an adult. It's kind of like that, but on a much more amplified scale. And obviously, depending on your level of physical fitness and ability, it's going to be easier or harder for various people. And as I mentioned in the last video, I was in quite a bad way physically in certain respects, because I had a pretty badly damaged... I had a really bad posture. I might stick a photo up if I can find it. You can see like how out of aligned my posture was. And I had a lot of damaged tissue, especially around my left lung, my hips and my spine and my neck as well. And actually my face as well. I could feel all this energy was like twisting up under my face and stuff. Total, unbelievable symptoms. Like, to try and words don't even do it justice. But so as this stuff is coming up, as this stuff's kind of been broken down in the body, the emotions linked to it are coming up for clearing as well. And that might come through like visions of memories, things that you completely forgot about. Like I say, you might have thought they were totally insignificant. It'd be coming up, a lot of it would come up through dreams as well. And just massive emotional releases. So just breaking down tears and anger and all sorts of stuff coming up to be processed. And I think there's this thing like that Eckhart Tolle talks about. I believe it's in the no, it's not in the Power Now. It's in A New Earth, and he talks about two ducks on a pond, and they get into this little... They swim too close to each other, and they end up getting into like a little disagreement and have this little scuffle. And when they sort of part, Eckhart Tolle talks about observing one of these ducks, and it just like ruffles its feathers really vigorously, and then just swims on and gets on with its day. And that is like the natural intelligence in animals, who are completely in tune with nature, and that is releasing that the built up tension from the altercation with the other duck. Whereas humans, we are kind of conditioned from a very young age to suppress our emotions and not release them, through like our parents, like things like, oh, stop crying, and through school and all sorts of stuff, and society in general. And so all those emotions and things that we don't properly deal with get stored in the body. And like I say, when you have a Kundalini awakening, I guess it's similar to when people talk about sometimes in ayahuasca, where you get shown certain things in your past that have caused you pain, or where you've caused others pain. It's kind of that kind of thing coming up. Just try to think if there's any more physical things I need to mention. I mean, it feels like huge amounts of electricity are constantly surging through your body. I had like energy just pouring. I say I had, I still do, and energy like pouring out of the palm of my hands, pouring out of my feet. Eye crease as well, just eyes just shooting off in all sorts of directions, completely uncontrolled, completely involuntary. My tongue, I couldn't swallow for long periods of time. It got to the point where I was just completely physically devastated, couldn't do anything, could barely pick up a glass of water, and I couldn't really look after myself. Thankfully, at the time, I was living with friends, and my brother and some other friends in Manchester who like helped look after me, getting shopping in and stuff like that, and even cooking meals and stuff, because I just couldn't take care of myself. I did end up going back to my parents' house for quite a period of time in the initial sort of few months, when I was like absolutely in the sort of the worst of it. But I also, so along with all this physical stuff, like I say, a lot of stuff comes up through dreams and visions and things like that. I had months and months and months, countless thousands of lucid dreams which seemed to last for like, it probably went on for about 8 months, just lucid dreams all the time, night after night after night, which was quite an enjoyable aspect of it, really, because like at the time when I was just spending most of my time in bed in complete agony, when I was asleep, it was like a release from this sort of world of torment that I was going through, of complete almost torture day after day. And in these lucid dreams, I was just free basically from that, and flying around and exploring and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of healing took place in the dream state, meeting certain people, a lot of people from my youth and childhood and school and stuff, coming up in dreams repeatedly, and I think they were representing certain archetypes and certain things that I needed to work through and heal. Yeah, so lots of stuff coming up in dreams. I was having lots of altered states of consciousness when I was awake as well. I remember nights where my room would. I remember one time my room was just full of hundreds and hundreds of entities and spirits, all sorts of different things I could see. I was having lots of reoccurring like visionary experiences of animals coming to me, which kind of ties in. I spoke about my experiences on a 5 gram mushroom trip, where I had like this shamanic transformation into various animals, and I kept over like the years, I kept having like different animals sort of come to me in these visionary states. So yeah, what else is there to say about all that period? I mean, as well as going through all this, I was having to go to hospitals as well, because obviously I couldn't work. I was completely incapacitated, and you can't really, like a Kundalini experience is not recognized as a legitimate reason to be not working. And um, I obviously had to go through a period of claiming benefits when I couldn't work, so I had to go to countless hospital appointments because they couldn't. It took like a year and a half of seeing various specialists and stuff to get a diagnosis from the medical establishment to my situation. But obviously, I was going there and saying half the story. I was just saying, oh well, I've got these pains and fatigue and stuff like that, because there's no point of me explaining the whole scenario to people who's for whom their kind of reality tunnel and belief system, what I was going through, is just completely beyond that. So that wasn't pleasant really, because just getting in cars was a horrible experience for me. I could when it was like sitting in a car, and I could feel every little bump of the road like ricocheting through my whole body, because my body was just clenching down and tightening. It felt like the muscles were being like pulled away from my bones quite a lot of the time, because the whole process was restructuring my body, which I'll get onto in a second. But yeah, having these intersperses to hospital and just being like plugged into all this energy just crazy through me, like sat in hospital waiting rooms and talking to the doctors, and the car journeys and stuff. They were just hellish. It was awful. I was having to be wheelchaired around and stuff at times, because, like I said, I could barely walk for hardly any distances in these first few years. So yeah, in relation to kind of a few thoughts on what I think the Kundalini energy was doing in this early stage. I guess for some people who think about Kundalini or hear about Kundalini, they might just think, oh, it's just this spiritual process or whatever. And obviously it is a spiritual process, but it's a multi-leveled process. It's a biological process as much as it's anything else. It's literally affecting the biology, and a complete a complete cellular transformation is occurring. But it's working on all levels: biological, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. All these different levels have been simultaneously alchemized and transformed, basically. So I think in relation to unlocking the sort of pain and damage in the physical body, this is just like my layman's terms understanding of what it is, and just try to explain it as best I can as how I explained it to myself. But when you get damage to the physical body, for me, a lot of it was caused by this intense and prolonged chest infection and coughing that I had when I was a lot younger, and it ended up damaging my muscles, twisting my spine. I mentioned it in the last video. But so I think what's happened is, like, as my body had readjusted to that pain and damage, it's almost like the muscles and the tissue had like set in this position. And I think if you look into like calcification, it's probably what was occurring when muscles are damaged, and especially if there's not enough. I can't remember the exact thing, but I think it might be if there's not enough sulfur in the body. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, the muscles literally end up not forming the same when they're under continued like pressure. Then they don't end up being properly flexible. And so I think this, like, you can think of it in terms of like scaffolding being erected around this structure that's out of balance, basically. And the Kundalini, you can't just blow the scaffolding down, otherwise the entire thing will collapse. So the Kundalini energy has got to release each bit in a specific order. And I've observed this throughout the years of it working in certain areas, and then allowing that to release other areas, then moving on, and then it'll go back, and then more energy can flow through. And so I think there's that kind of, it's literally realigning the sort of musculoskeletal structure. And I believe that it requires a J-shaped spine. If you look into things like primal posture and stuff. And there's been studies looking at certain indigenous tribal communities where their spine is a J shape, as opposed to a lot of people in civilized society and stuff. They've got like a curved S-shaped spine from various things, sitting down too much. Or if you think about what happens when you're a child, you get put into a school classroom, you sat on a chair for however many hours a day when you should basically be running around as a free human, but that's not our situation. So yeah, I think the Kundalini's got to completely unless you like, if you've been practicing like yoga for 20 years or whatever, and you already had a perfectly aligned posture, I don't think the process would be as hard to go through. A lot of the suffering I went through is because there was so much physical damage to work with, so much emotional baggage and all sorts of crap to clear, bad lifestyle, diet choices from when I was younger, chemical drugs, things like that just accumulate in the cells. So all that is to work through, and in the early stages, like I say, it's just total chaos, because it just completely takes over your body. And yeah, it was absolutely hellish, to be honest, for a long time. There were periods where I thought I was going to die. There were periods where I was complete. I mean, I never like seriously contemplated suicide, but there were times when I was just at such a loss as to how I could keep going. It was, yeah, there were some really tough moments throughout, because just for years and years I couldn't like lie down on my side in comfort. I couldn't sit down in comfort. I could never rest. It was just this, it was continuous, and a lot of these symptoms I'm still going through now. But now for a start, my body's become much more accustomed to it. I'm much more flexible. It's worked through a lot of the stuff. A lot of the emotional stuff's been worked through, and I basically spend like 2 or 3 hours a day just moving with the Kriyas, and I have done for the last sort of 3 years, and that has just helped so much in letting this energy work through me, and helped rebuild my strength and stuff. And obviously now I'm kind of doing exercise and all sorts of stuff, which in those early few years I couldn't do anything. I was so fatigued, in so much pain, that it was just, yeah, impossible to do anything. So I'll probably leave it there for this video. I'm not sure what I kind of feel like I've just been sort of rambling on. I hope it's come across as relatively coherent, and I've managed to kind of get across the level of insanity that kind of engulfed my life. And one thing to add, like, that was all the way through it, even in the kind of darkest of times, there was part of me that completely understood the process. And sometimes it was really in the back reaches of my mind, because all this chaos and panic was sort of centre stage. But there was part of me that I always knew that it was a healing process, and that it'd be all right in the end, and it was just part of the transformation that I had to go through. I always had that, and that was this really powerful understanding that helped me through some of the toughest periods in it. And I think that's important for people to have. I mean, I will do a video sort of explaining ways to help deal with getting through it, and also various techniques and dietary things and all sorts of things that can help. But I just wanted to put a video out just outlining my story, basically, before I do any of that. And so, yeah, with this part of me that always kind of knew what was going on, and also dotted throughout, and a constant theme throughout, were synchronistic gifts from the universe, basically to reinforce to me that I was being taken care of, essentially, and I was on the right path. This is worth sharing, so I'll just give a little example of one that was quite. I mean, it's not by far no means the most powerful and extreme example of synchronicity, but it was an interesting one, because one of the things when you're going through a Kundalini awakening, especially early on, is it's incredibly difficult to explain it to other people. I mean, this is still difficult for me to like put it properly into words and try and get across, because it's such an alien thing to go through in certain ways. It's almost impossible to put into words to get it across to people. But obviously, when it first starts, it's like on the surface of it, it's like for friends and family and stuff, they're just seeing someone they knew who was all right a few weeks ago, a few months ago, their health and life completely collapsed. And when most people don't know anything about Kundalini, the vast majority of people aren't even aware of many spiritual topics in general, but especially not things like Kundalini awakenings. So having to try and explain this kind of stuff, I remember for years I'd just be like, oh God, if only I could just touch someone and just for a second they could feel what I was feeling, so they could understand. Because you feel really alone and isolated in a lot of ways, because there's no societal framework available for people to have any comprehension of what you're going through. So it's kind of a pretty lonely path in a lot of ways. But yeah, so the quick little example is when I was first, probably about 3 or 4 months into the Kundalini experience, and as I mentioned a bit ago in this video, I ended up going home to stay with my parents for a while when it was like the absolute worst, and I really couldn't look after myself. I'd lost loads of weight as well, and anyway, in a totally bad way. But I was explaining to my mum that what it was, and I'm like telling her all this stuff about Kundalini awakenings and blah blah blah. Obviously, she's like concerned for my well-being, but above anything, and she's probably thinking, what the hell is he on about? He's totally lost his mind as well. But the crazy thing was, the exact same time as I'm telling my mum all this stuff, my dad was not in the house, and he'd gone to. He'd had a stroke like a year or so earlier, so we went to these there's like stroke clubs or whatever, where people who've had strokes meet up and talk about like how they're doing, all that kind of stuff. And he'd gone. He was at one the very same time as I'm telling him, and the caduceus symbol, which some people might be aware of, I'll stick a little image of it up, but it's the entwining serpents around a staff with the wings at the top, and it's a perfect. I mean, it's been used for lots of things, but it's originally, I believe, it's a diagram of the awoken Kundalini energy in a human body, encircling the spine. The sort of the pin. The pin is the spine. The head of the pin is like either the third eye or the awoken crown chakra, and the wings like representing the illumination. But yeah, it's used in the medical profession sometimes. And at the very same time I'm telling my mum this whole thing, my dad's like the other side of town, and for some reason someone asks about, oh, what's that symbol? It must have been like up on some poster or whatever. So he comes home, and my mum was like telling him about this, and I'd mentioned the caduceus, because the caduceus was like a real trigger symbol for me years earlier, before my Kundalini. I just like this crazy attachment to it, and it's a really synchronistic generator symbol for me. It's another story. I'm just getting off on loads of side tangents here. But so when he came back and he's telling my mom, and she was like, oh, well, James has just been speaking about that and telling me about it. So yeah, it just, I don't know how much it like helped them understand or whatever, but it was powerful for me. I was just and I think it kind of helped show them there was some validity to what I was talking about. And I just had all sorts of synchronicities kind of throughout. But yeah, that's for a different video. And basically, after this kind of dark night of the soul period, which I'm sort of went on for about 3 years of it being really intense, it gradually started to ease off, and I ended up just bit by bit going out for tiny little walks, maybe for like 10 minutes just across the road to the park every week, once a week or something. And then it just built up slowly and slowly. And it got to a point, I was living in Manchester at that point, like, and the situations came about anyway where I could move back to my to West Yorkshire, where I'm actually from. And I moved back there probably about 4 years after the reawakening, and I kind of live here now, and it's out of the city, it's in the countryside and beautiful surroundings. And getting out of the city actually was a massive part of my healing, to be honest. Once I got here and I could go out into nature much more easily, because there was just like a little park in the city across the road, a bit like going and pottering around that and stuff. And yeah, it was massive help coming here and being able to immerse myself in nature much more easily. But I just built it up bit by bit. Started doing little bits of swimming after a while, and every step of the way was incredibly difficult, because you've got to understand, I'm coming back. I'm coming from a position of being so disabled, basically, after this prolonged period of being bedbound, that it was like learning to walk again almost. And it's just been 4 to 5 years now of gradually building myself more and more to health, integrating this energy more and more, integrating it emotionally as well, completely transforming my diet, completely transforming my relationship to reality in lots of ways, meditation, present moment practices, all sorts of things that have hugely helped and kind of got me to where I am now, which, although I still have a lot of the symptoms in certain ways, and I still do have, I'm not like just free to kind of go and do whatever I want anytime. It's still a huge part of every moment of my life, really, but it's completely bearable now, and I'm completely kind of integrated in the process, as opposed to just being almost like a victim of this crazed onslaught, which was what the first few years really felt like. But as I said in that last video, that's the nature of a healing process. You've got to purge all the crap, basically, and that's not going to be easy. My deluded ideas, I guess, when it first awoke, was that it was just going to be like this quick instant healing process that'd just be over quickly. But you can't do that. You've got to work through the if from where I was, if I'd have just been like brought to where I am now, or even further down the line where I potentially might be in a few years in relation to integration of the energy and health and healing and stuff, I don't think the physical vessel would have been able to contain it. It'd have just been like an atomic bomb going off. It'd be too big a energetic change and shift to occur. The process has got to occur through the medium and passage of time otherwise the physical vessel won't be able to contain that much energy and stay together. It's got to build up to it. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions or whatever, stick them in the comments, and I will see you again soon. Peace. I just wanted to add this little bit at the end, because they say a picture paints 1,000 words, and this image from Alex Gray, specifically the middle panel, it's his from his piece Journey of the Wounded Healer, and it sums up the dark night of the soul period in some ways better than anything that you can say to get it across. So I just wanted to show you this image. Okay, cheers guys.